Welcome to the 3D Players podcast, where we explore personalization in healthcare through advancements in 3D technology. We'll talk to leaders championing more predictable and sustainable patient care. I'm Sebastian de Boot and I'm joined by my co-host Peter Slagmolen. How do you know which personalized approach will lead to the optimal patient outcomes? Perhaps the key is in predictive planning through computational modeling and simulation. At least that's what you'll find out today from our guest, Thierry Marchal. Thierry has been with Ansys for over 30 years and is now the Program Director of Healthcare Solutions. He's tirelessly evangelizing and working towards the adoption of in silico methods and the digitization of healthcare. And since 2016, he's also been influencing policymakers as Secretary General of the Avicenna Alliance. In other words, if computational modeling is our crystal ball, then Thierry Marchal is one of our best fortune tellers out there. Welcome, Thierry.
Thank you.
Maybe for anybody not familiar with computational modeling and simulation, can you explain what it is?
Well, definitely. That's a technology for the future, but also from the recent past. We are creating a computer model. A computer model is just a model, numerical model of what's going on in the reality. And this has been used in all the industry for over 50 years. So why do we do that compared to doing this kind of experimental? When you're doing the experiment, of course, you have the real person or the real airplane flying, but you don't have all the information over there. When you are creating a computer model, you've got all the information, the stress, the velocity of the fluid, and so on, everywhere in the computer model. That means that you can help to drive the experiment, but you can collect a lot of more information. On top of that, that means that you can bring a lot of variation. What if, in fact, the patient is not like you, Sebastian, a man, but a woman? They could bring in some difference. All that is bringing us more insight about what could be done.
Thierry, you already mentioned airplanes, and the technology does apply broader than healthcare. Can you give some examples maybe on how computational modeling is today already impacting our lives in other areas than healthcare?
Well, it is impacting the life everywhere. For example, the fact that we've got good temperature here. The airflow for the air conditioning has been used by a simulation. Today, the airplane has been designed using computer model from Ansys and from other tools for the last 50 years. So that means that every single plane who's still flying today has been designed with simulation. Or for the car, in order to make sure that when you have a crash, like the ice on the road yesterday, all inhabitants of the car will be in a safe condition. Means that we need to do a lot of analysis. Rather than crashing all this nice car, which is very expensive and taking a lot of time, people are using computer model to see what's going on. That doesn't mean that we will get completely rid of this kind of testing. That means that we can do a lot of tests on the computer. But thinking about your computer, your cell phone, all that needs to be modeled extensively with simulation. Whether they will be sending the right energy, whether they will be not sending the energy in your head when you are giving a call, all these kind of things could be a model. We are talking a lot about the energy and the sustainability right now, climate transition. How can we move from fossil fuel to this kind of a renewable energy? That's a major challenge. How can we change from combustion car to electric car? Well, we need 1 century to update the combustion car to the level that we've got today. We've got only 10 years to make sure that the electric car will be essential. So that means that we need to do all this kind of simulation to accelerate the process and at the same time to reduce the cost to go to the real market. So this technology that we are discussing today, they've been around for over 50 years. In fact, Ansys has been created 52 years ago. This is nothing new. And when people are sometimes a little bit hesitant to say, okay, simulation for healthcare, yeah, this is nice, colorful picture, but can I really trust that? I used to say, okay, if you don't trust simulation, don't fly, don't take a flight anymore. Stay away from your car, stay away from your cell phone, because all that have been using simulation for a lot of time. That doesn't mean that we can completely trust simulation. That means that we can trust the technology. Now we need to continuously challenge the model.
Well, the things that you say is interesting is that you said, okay, we want to avoid having to crash all cars to predict what's going to be the best design of a car, for example. And you can put this in a computer and then model that. I guess that there's a parallel to that in healthcare, right? So if you draw that parallel, why is this kind of technology relevant in healthcare? And then maybe more specifically towards personalized care and the scalable personalized care?
Well, as soon as you have create a computer model, let's take of you, Peter. Well, you create a computer model of yourself. Suddenly you are not feeling well. That's a way to say, okay, what's going on in Peter? Is there some things related to he's not breathing enough? He was having too much wine yesterday evening, or this kind of thing, so that we can have this kind of personalized healthcare. What do you need to take? More serious example, if you are diabetic and therefore you need some kind of insulin, what is the dose of insulin that we need to inject? And that means that you might be forgetting that. Can we model your body in such a way that together with some sensor, we can complement this kind of digital twin? Let me bring this kind of concept. The digital twin will be in parallel with the physical twin. And the digital twin is continuously connected over there. The physical twin, we will take some measurement that will be feeding into the digital twin, and the digital twin will be able to predict. That's the goal of the simulation and the computer modeling and simulation here, is to being able to predict what will happen in a certain condition depending upon some event. And we see that, for example, you are eating a good lunch or good dinner. We can predict that indeed you will need to get more insulin. Let's measure some kind of glucose in your blood. Considering that, we know whether we can introduce some more insulin into your body so that you will feel comfortable. People are even thinking, and I've heard that a few years ago, that maybe we can connect this kind of wearable insulin pump together with Google. Google will detect that you are arriving to your famous restaurant that you like very much, and therefore Google and this wearable insulin pump will say, Peter wants to get a very good restaurant. Let's pre-inject some insulin so that he will feel completely comfortable. That's the kind of future that we can have, which is becoming a reality. Of course, there are a lot of things over there because privacy of the people are very, very important. We always need to coordinate that with the regulatory environment. But the technology need to be ready, and it is getting ready.
It's very interesting to see. And I'm not sure if I'm ready yet to trust a system to inject some medicine as I'm going into the restaurant, but I think it's probably a matter of time for just getting used to the idea.
Some self-control is still something I would like.
Yeah. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, computational modeling and simulation allows doctors to try out different scenarios and how they could treat a patient before really treating them, which sounds, very, very powerful if we could do that. Where are we now when it comes to really applying the technology in day-to-day practice? Do you have any examples of how this has been impacting personalized care?
I would put two things separate. Indeed, there are the doctor who can take advantage of simulation. But there are a lot of discussion, and I will come back to that later on, the question of liabilities. If the doctor is trusting simulation result in order to take the decision, and by the way, the doctor is always the one making the final decision, it's never the result of a simulation, but where is the liability? Is the simulation result influencing the doctor? That's a big open question right now that we are still discussing with the authority. We need to make sure the results are validated enough so that we can define that. Another element where simulation is used extremely regularly is in the design of this kind of device, whether it is a sensor to make a diagnosis or whether to make some kind of a treatment. For this kind of element, and let me take the example of an orthopedic situation. If someone had been impacted badly, unfortunately, maybe in Ukraine right now, but in any kind of a car accident as well. So that means that we need to replace some part of the skeleton with some kind of part, which can be 3D manufactured. That could be a very good idea here to say, okay, well, I want to really personalize the implant to the people in front of us. Well, we can take a medical imaging of the patient in order to find out what should be the shape that we want to introduce and 3D print this shape. We can model the kind of 3D shape in order to make sure that this will be good, but that means that we will be implanting a new device in the patient without making any testing. That's not very much along the line of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, or the European Authority, and so on. Now let's think a little bit differently. Let's imagine that you've got a bad accident. We scan you very quickly. We design the shape of the implant that we want to do. And then we are performing a few tests in order to make sure that this kind of implant that we will be implanting is reacting correctly with the body, will be no problem with any kind of impact. The structure, the fatigue will be good enough. That means that before making any kind of implant, we are collecting enough testing, enough information to have not the same certainty than some things that have been going through a clinical trial, but at least enough to move into this area. Those are examples of today's application of simulation, because we can always predict what's going on for a given patient, and we can fully personalize this kind of approach. Later on, the clinicians are coming, and the clinicians are willing to do that. If I may, let me take an example from Dr. Hoganson from Boston Children's Hospital. He was getting a little girl named Ali. He was presenting that in one of our conferences. And this Ali's got a major heart malfunction. The blood was not going through the lungs anymore. So she's got about 1 year to live. That's very sad. She was 11 years old. So he was scanning the thoracic cavity of the patient to analyze what will be the blood flow, create a computer model. And to some extent, it was relatively simple. What's going on if I'm doing a bypass? Where will the flow go? First element confirmed that what he was learning from the surgical training, the flow will go mainly to the left lung and not to the other one. Very bad stuff. So he was saying, okay, let me play a little bit with this geometry, this virtual geometry. Some will say the digital twin of the little Ali. What's going on? And change a little bit the shortcuts that we are doing. He found a way in which way 54% of the blood was going to one lung, 46% to the other lung. He said, okay, that's good. Let me follow this kind of surgery. And he was very surprised, because not only the surgery was working well, but on top of that, this little Ali, who should have stayed for 1 month in the hospital, after 1 week, she was running everywhere, so they were telling her to go back home, saving a lot of money for the insurance company. Sorry to talk about money, but this is also part of it. And a few years later, this little Ali still be growing and playing with everybody. That's the kind of real impact, but again, we have to make sure that the surgeon fully understand what is the role and the limitation of the simulation so that they can really apply it.
I think that's a very strong example of the value that it can bring. And you clearly point out that the surgeon needs to understand the possibilities, but also the limitations. Like, how do you explain that? Because it's very advanced what you're doing, and it's typically not what any physician has been trained for. So how do you help him understand the limitations of the technology?
Well, I've got the chance to speak several times with a clinician in different hospitals, including here in Belgium. These people are very smart, but doesn't have the time to learn how to use this kind of solver, because they're fully dedicated to save their life. It could be our life, and they don't have time to learn this solver. Well, these people are ready to trust. If you show them that indeed this is not just colorful picture, but you can really trust these kind of things. And I was showing them, even showing the Navier-Stokes equation to the clinician, telling them, okay, you don't need to understand that. You need to understand that we are solving mass conservation, energy conservation, basic law of Newton. I was also showing and having the same message in front of the European Parliament. They understand this kind of thing. They understand the basic. They understand that we can help them. Then after that, to some extent, with simulation, you can see what they cannot see. We used to say that the simulation gives you superpower. You can make the invisible visible. When, coming back to Dr. Hoganson, you can see where the blood flow is going on. That's quite easy, and provided that you can trust this kind of result of a simulation, they will look at that just like if they were manipulating different kind of elements and use their common sense to say, okay, where can I go? What do I need to do? So we don't need to teach the clinician. To some extent, we need to work with them in such a way that we are developing some application, very easy to use, very quick, and after that, they can move on.
That's interesting, because in a way, is that maybe the role of the industry in making this technology more accessible, more scalable, is in finding ways in which we can translate what is intrinsically complicated, translate that into solutions that are easy enough to understand for a physician, maybe that have more visual aspects to it, that translates more closely to their patient and the things that they do understand?
Well, we tried that in the past. It was a complete failure, because we show our simulation, we were very proud to show them, here is what you have to do. They were very excited, and they never use it, because we were not answering their question. What we found out, what is working very well, is that we are at the service of all these clinicians. We are showing them the power of simulation, and then we are asking them, okay, what do you need? What are the problems that you are facing? What are you challenged? The only way to design some clinical application that will be valuable for the clinician is to do it with them. And by the way, not to tell them, okay, come to our office and we will be discussing that. I tried that as well, and most of the time, when you've got a meeting, they need to come, they've got an emergency, surgery, and all this kind of thing. What we found out is that we're putting PhD students directly in the hospital. So that what's going on is that whenever the clinicians got some problem, they are bursting in the room where there are some engineers to say, okay, here is my problem. How can we solve that? And we keep discussing with them. The clinician need to define and design what do they need, what will be interesting. And by the way, sometimes this is something very basic. We used to solve something very advanced. We are very proud of that. Well, very nice, but they don't care about that. Another example, we were working with ophthalmologists. These ophthalmologists, in order to treat cataract, they need to make some small cut in the eyes. The problem is what is the length and the depth of the cut. If they are not doing that with simulation, they are based on the average eyes. And if your eyes is average, perfect. You will have a perfect vision after the one surgery. If your eyes is not average, so that means that you need 2 or 3 surgery, or you still need to wear some glass. Some people in Switzerland design a software, a clinical application, in order to scan the eyes, and based on the scan and the thermomechanical deformation of the eyes during the laser treatment, to define exactly what will be the vision after some specific surgery. So you can start to optimize the start of the surgery, and based on that, you can give some guidance and good insight to the surgeon. All that have been done with the ophthalmologist. When you look at the interface of this tool, you will say, okay, but that doesn't look very good. It looks very complex. No, it's exactly along the line of what ophthalmologists are used to do. And along this line, we recently got the interview of 76-year-old guy. He used to drive his car, to watch the TV, to read newsletter. He liked to make some very tiny work. He was not able to do that. He's got 5 different pairs of glass for that. We did the surgery, and now he can do all the things like what he was doing in the past. If we are not working hand by hand with the clinician, you are wasting your time, and more importantly, you are wasting their time.
That collaboration sounds very similar to what drove the adoption of 3D printing in the hospitals, where it's also been because of hospitals taking this activity inside the hospital that there's good collaboration between engineers and clinicians, and all sorts of meaningful applications are arising suddenly, which is great in development. Now, it doesn't always scale that well if you need to always have somebody very technical and probably highly educated along a physician on every case. What does it take to then scale computational modeling? And do you perhaps have any success stories to share of applications that has really managed to scale up and reach really more patients?
There are some of them, indeed. When I was saying you that we've got our own engineer in the hospital, it's at the beginning to design this element, then to find out what is a reasonable computational time. And we are talking about minute, sometimes second, while maybe the surgeon will do the surgery after a few days, but the focus of the surgeon is only for a few minutes on a given patient. So you need to get all the results at that time. So after that, if we want to deploy that, certainly we need to have this kind of user interface, which is familiar for this kind of a clinician, ophthalmologist, cardiovascular surgeon, and anything else, and the right time, and access to the right computational power, like the cloud, provided that we can do that outside of the hospital. But I would say that the biggest problem right now is the adoption. Clinicians are always a little bit hesitant. They don't know what it is. So even if we have a very good solution, that means that they don't know, they don't have time to learn about that. So communication, telling them that we've got excellent success stories, bringing them to try to do that. And especially the young surgeon, young doctor might be an open one. Others might be seeing that, oh, this will replace me. And I don't want that. They're fearing this kind of thing. So we need to make sure that everybody is feeling comfortable, that we are bringing them additional insights so that they can treat patients with less risk of the patient complaining, the patient coming back to him, and possibly to treat more patients at the same time. So right now, this is one of the key elements. The other things, as I was mentioning, is the reliability. If the clinical application is giving you some result, and of course, this is a decision of the clinician, but let's imagine that a patient is not getting some acceptable result for that. The patient might be complaining, and the clinician might be saying, okay, but I was driven by the clinical application. So where is the reliability? That's exactly the same problem than for the autonomous car right now. If there is an accident, whose responsibility is it? The car manufacturer, the driver, the software the developer. That's not clear right now. And I was discussing with the European Commission a couple of weeks ago, and indeed, we need to make some progress. That doesn't mean that the software developer have no responsibility for that. We just want to know what do we need to demonstrate to show that we've done all our homework? Otherwise, very difficult to group like Ansys to say, okay, I will be investing a lot of money in healthcare because there is a big market opportunity if there is such a bigger risk. So we need to clarify this element. We need to realize that all this software company, we are facing the competition between different industries. Should we invest more in automotive, in high-tech, in aeronautic, in healthcare, and so on? We know that there is a big market for healthcare. We know that we can really impact people, but we have to make sure that everybody will accept that, clinician, but also the patient themselves, and later on that there is no major risk if we are going in over there.
So the elements that you bring forward to scale are obviously communication and making sure that everybody understands what you're doing, and then evidence speaks for itself, I think, and obviously proving the safety of the approaches. So how does that impact then your company strategy? If you think about Ansys as a company, how does it impact your strategy in trying to make this adoption and broader adoption a reality?
One of the key elements is to work as part of an ecosystem. If we are working alone, there is no chance that we can succeed. So we've got a large ecosystem of many academic, hospital, regulator. We are speaking regularly with EMA, the European Medicine Agency, with the FDA and all these elements. We are collaborating with them, but also with other software companies like Materialize, with other hardware companies. For example, in the future, all that will require a lot of simulation. Where can we find simulation in the cloud? So we are working closely with Microsoft, with Google, with Amazon, in order to find the right way so that we can transfer this data. Those are personal data. So we need to make sure that everything is fine and all this data privacy will be properly protected. We need to take advantage of the European health data space that has been recently created. So those are the elements that we are doing, working as part of an ecosystem, working with the key stakeholder, medical device company, pharma, because pharma is taking a lot of advantage of that and now growing quite well. This kind of clinician, the academic people.
One of the aspects that you didn't touch on is the validation of some of the technology, because indeed working in an ecosystem, making sure that you provide safe cloud access and so on, I think those are very crucial aspects in driving further adoption. But in essence, the core validation of the technology in itself going to be a big aspect of that as well. Do you have strategies that you can follow to make sure that simulation and modeling aligns basically with reality? And do you have a success story to share where you can demonstrate that it's very well aligned with reality?
Validation is one of the most fundamental elements in healthcare and simulation for healthcare. And we are talking about two kinds of validation. First, you need to validate that indeed, compared to experimental testing, you are getting the right result. But what is even more important is clinical validation. Will the outcome that we will see on the patient in the hospital will be the right one? That's why I'm talking about this ecosystem. The only one to have this kind of clinical validation is work directly with the clinician. Up to the point that we need to regulate all that. Validation is one of the key elements, and we were working with ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, to define if we are willing to use computer model, we say digital evidence, the result of simulation, for regulatory approval. Meaning that rather than doing a lot of clinical trial, we can create some kind of digital evidence, result of simulation, before the clinical trial. Very important. So that means that we are accumulating a lot of evidence before implanting some kind of device into real patient. This is much more ethical. But the key question is, how do we do the verification and validation? Verification means, how do you solve the equation properly? Validation is, how do you make sure that your model represents the reality? So with ASME, we've been working for the last 10 years in order to create the ASME VNV 40, which is verification and validation. 40 is for medical device. This element will define in every single step how can we make sure that we are verifying the solver that we are creating, and how do we validate the model? What will be the risk associated by this model? I can tell you that validation is maybe taking 10 times more than the development of a new model. Because you can validate it in some specific condition, everything is working well. The power of simulation is that you can do that for a very large number of cases. And along this line, to show that this is widely accepted, I remember that in 2018, Medtronic was presenting in front of the European Parliament an example where they create a computer model of the heart using LSINA and a computer model of the pacemaker. They implant the pacemaker into the heart in the computer model. In parallel of that, they were also doing some clinical trial, extensive clinical trial. And by the way, the computer model were giving some result very similar to the clinical trial. They were presenting all that to the FDA. It was in 2017, the computer model and the result of the clinical trial. The FDA was very pleased by the situation and accept the result, the digital evidence, the result of the model together with the clinical trial. Of course, the FDA got additional question. What's going on in this specific condition, or if the patient is like that? Medtronic was asking, okay, considering that you have accepted the computer model that we have used and validate with a clinical application, can we answer your question using the computer model? And the FDA say yes. The result of that is that rather than doing a new clinical trial, an additional clinical trial to answer only this question on 256 patients, total estimated cost would have been 10 million euros, and the time would have taken 2 years to do that. The FDA was saying, okay, yes, indeed, you can use a computer model. After 2 weeks, only 2 weeks, they were getting all the results coming from the computer model and present that to the FDA. The FDA said, okay, we agree on that. You can say, okay, that's good for Medtronic. They were saving $10 million. The real story, because the product was released 2 years in advance, that means that during these 2 years, we were treating 10,000 patients. 10,000 patients get this new implant with the new pacemaker. That means that 10,000 patients were benefiting from a new, more advanced technology, better for the patient, rather than just using the old element. So that's where this kind of simulation, using our tools that we validate quite extensively before releasing the tool, but is also validated by the clinician and by the regulatory authority, with the goal to accelerate medical innovation. That's one of the key elements. And you were talking about personalized healthcare earlier today. The reason to do personalized healthcare is that for me, getting a little bit old, I've got some excellent healthcare. But for my children and for our grandchildren later on, there is no chance that they will have the same quality of care that I enjoy if we are not changing things. Look at that. The cost of healthcare today is $9 trillion every year. It is increasing exponentially. If we don't do some things to personalize the care, the quality of healthcare will go down. So that's a major responsibility that we've got here as part of this global ecosystem. How do we change the situation in such a way that our children and grandchildren will have better care than we've got so far?
Is that why you're also part of the Avicenna Alliance? Is that one of the goals to really push this on the agenda of the policymakers so that it accelerates? Can you explain us a little bit what the Avicenna Alliance is all about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As I say, we need to be part of an ecosystem. We need to join force in order to make sure that we can rechange the situation. Join force between medical device company, between pharmaceutical company, between software company. And all that is done in a pre-competitive environment. So the Avicenna Alliance is a Belgian organization, a non-for-profit organization, with the only goal to advocate and regulate the adoption of in situ method. So that means that we are several competitors in terms of software developer, but also medical device company, group like Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and others, Stryker, Johnson & Johnson, and so on. We are all there to find out, okay, what are the different challenges? What is AI for in situ, for example? How can we engage with the FDA? And as part of it, I'm meeting with the FDA every month. How can we speak in front of the European Parliament? How can we engage with the US Senator? And by the way, when we met with the US Senator, when we were showing them the value of simulation, they quickly understand the value that it could have. And they were writing to the FDA to say, okay, you need to develop some kind of digital twin. You need to adopt this kind of in situ. And I can tell you that the FDA was very pleased by that because they were receiving more revenue in order to push that. So as part of the Avicenna Alliance, one of the key elements is to join force so that we are bigger and we can influence the different people. One of the key elements is that 50% of the Avicenna Alliance are the different academic group, like KU Leuven, like a University of Liège in Belgium, but like the most important university around the world, because we need to combine this kind of research and business activity with the goal to accelerate the development and the innovation in healthcare using this kind of in situ method.
We are recording this episode in December 2022. The world just got overthrown by this OpenAI chatbot. Now, both modeling and AI have the objective to predict the future. And one does that through deep understanding of the reality. That's what you're trying to achieve. While the other is really just about huge volumes of real-life data without really caring at all about understanding the underlying dynamics. We can't deny that the impact of AI has been exploding over the past years. Do you actually consider modeling and AI as competing technologies?
Well, they're not at all competitive. They're complementing a technology. AI is part of InSico. InSico is anything using computer. So by definition, AI is part of InSico. On the other hand, AI is using any kind of data in order to be able to predict what could be there, what could be done, and to give some kind of guidance. So it could be real-world evidence, the observation that we are doing, but why not using simulation result, this kind of digital evidence, especially if no observation has been made so far. I'm thinking about orphan disease, and therefore the fact that we didn't have enough patient to do that. So the AI is taking advantage of simulation result, this kind of digital evidence, to complement all this real-world evidence that they've got, with one of the big advantages that the digital evidence has to go through a lot of validation. That's one of the elements that we were discussing earlier. That's sometimes much better than any kind of observation which have been made and for which we don't have enough confirmation that this is good quality. On the opposite, simulation is also taking a lot of advantage from AI. For example, when you want to combine a model of the human body, but you don't have any physical or mechanistic model to show the evolution of a pathology, well, there is no way to move forward unless if you have some kind of a real-world evidence and AI extracting all this real-world evidence, allowing you to create this kind of model for the evolution of the pathology. Suddenly, you can combine all of these elements. The advantage of simulation is that you've got a mechanistic model, and therefore you can understand why is it happening like that. On the other hand, AI is taking advantage of all of these elements, not just related to digital evidence. So I think that there is a very nice complement for that, and I would recommend this white paper that we've recently published as part of the Avicenna Alliance about the AI and InSico technology.
One thing that triggers me in this discussion as well is how do you look at the role of explainability in between what AI is doing and what computational modeling is doing, which the second is intrinsically more explainable than AI, and what is the impact there, you think, on really bringing solutions to the market then?
Well, that's really complementary. We cannot explain everything, but we can take advantage of all the elements that we are seeing. Along this line, let me take the example of a European project, Primage, which is done in collaboration with different elements. Ansys is part of it. The goal is to being able to predict the evolution of a tumor, a cancerous tumor, in the abdomen of a teenager. Anything related to children is always important. We've got very little information about what will be the growth of the tumor. Based on some observation, they were able to give a model about not only the growth of the tumor, but the evolution of the impact of chemotherapy agent that you were introducing. Using that, they were publishing a model where they are able to predict with a relatively good accuracy. The model in terms of volume, something like 92-94% of accuracy of the model. They were able not only to predict the growth of the tumor, but also the decrease of the tumor based on the chemotherapy agent. So right now, there is no competition. The reason why AI was so popular compared to simulation, AI is a buzzword. We are talking about artificial intelligence, so always fun. What is helping quite a lot this simulation right now is digital twin, because that's also a buzzword. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the patient, because it could be any of us here. What can we do for the patient? And one of my key concerns when Europe was saying, okay, we need to develop this kind of digital twin or virtual twin, is that sometimes it could be thinking about too far in 20 years, 30 years, and so on. That's good to have big vision like that. But one of my elements is what do we do for the patient today? How can we save life? And with this kind of cancer treatment, just create as part of the Avicenna Alliance a task force about cancer and InSico oncology. What can we do, for example, for breast cancer and prostate cancer, which are the most popular one, costing a lot of money. But we can face all that ourselves as well. InSico can bring a lot of solution in order to accelerate this kind of numerical innovation. So I think that these two elements are complementary. If we are thinking about the patient first, we'll take whatever in the existing technology will help us to achieve this goal.
Thierry, you're clearly not tired evangelizing the technology to the world. I mean, it's great to see how much passion you still bring. If there's one thing that you still can realize in the remainder of your career, what would you like it to be?
I think that the goal is always to make sure that we can save more life. It means that we can make sure that the next generation will benefit from what we were doing. One is to make sure that the quality of healthcare will be better because we are bringing this kind of in situ. And if I may, there is another thing which is important to me and which is becoming quite important for healthcare industry, both medical device and pharma. We need not just to save lives, but also to save the planet. Sustainability is becoming something extremely important in healthcare. We realize that, well, to make sure to improve the care, sometimes we were putting too much carbon in the atmosphere, we were putting too much waste in the world, which is, at the end, bringing more patients to us. And right now, the medical device and pharma industry realize that by using simulation, we can combine the fact that we can bring more safety for the patient, we can reduce the cost, we can go faster, and we can be more environmental friendly. So that's why I'm still so passionate about simulation. This is not the Uber solution here, but this tool properly used can really save quite a lot of things and make sure that we can just enjoy the life, enjoy all the pleasure we've got, while at the same time having a good element. And quite often when my daughter are coming to my office to say, okay, but why daddy are you working so late? I keep telling them that together with the entire ecosystem, all the people working with me, we can make sure that their life will be 10 to 20 years longer and healthier. Based on that, they tell me to keep working as hard as possible.
It's a really nice answer, Thierry, and probably the right answer. I was hoping a little bit that you were going to say, I'm going to help Wout van Aert win the Tour de France by improving the simulations, because that's also things that you guys are working on, right? And I'm taking a very big sidestep now, but since we're here in Belgium, I thought, hey, go for it.
Indeed, and I've got the chance to work with this team, and these guys are really fantastic. I was explaining to Wout van Aert that with mathematical model, we can find out what is the best mathematical position on the bike. But at the same time, I was telling him that, we have to make sure that you are comfortable on the bike because you are racing for 5, 6, 7 hours. He told me, okay, don't worry about that. Comfort is for me, give me the best possible position. Those are all these kind of things that we are doing. Wout got some difficulty in some stage of the Tour de France, but what he's doing is fantastic, and we are always very proud to receive some nice jersey from him and to help him to do that. Not just in terms of cycling, but for example, all this stadium and creating this kind of computer model for all the stadium, especially to model the propagation of COVID in the stadium. If you remember, one of the first elements in Bergamo was the spread of COVID in the old stadium that has killed quite a lot of people. Now we can model, and we have used the Johan Cruyff Stadium, Arena Stadium in Amsterdam. We've modeled the airflow and the COVID propagation in the stadium, putting 30,000 people in our computer model, which is a kind of a world record. We run a simulation using a CFD with 6 billion cells in the model in order to be able to predict this kind of propagation. So yes, sport are an excellent element in order to show the simulation. Coming back to one of the elements that we were discussing, communication is essential. And that's the goal for sport. It's not a huge business, but quite often on TV to explain how we can improve the performance of the athlete in a perfectly ethical way, just doing that. And certainly, people understand this element, make the invisible visible. If we show the airflow to Wout van Aert, to Jonas Vingegaard or others, that means that they will understand how to put their helmet. I'm talking very seriously. We are showing some simulation to some of these champions in order to explain to them how to put the different elements, making the invisible visible. So that means that people understand the value of simulation and will say, okay, yes, indeed, we need to do that. Whether this is for sport, for war to win, but also for healthcare, and to make sure that all the clinicians, all the patients as well will say, okay, that's what I want to do.
I didn't realize indeed that this is also helping to bring an impact in what you're doing in healthcare space, but it makes a lot of sense, and it really ties back to one of the earliest things we talked about on the communication and making it really more known.
And I think for a lot of people, it makes performance very tangible, right? If you draw the parallel with an athlete, actually what we're trying to do is maybe towards performance of a physician or a surgeon or maybe even a patient in revalidation. But essentially, we're trying to increase performance there as well, right? So it's very similar in a way, and that's what's interesting.
And similar to all what has been done in other industries for so long. So that's why I'm always a bit annoyed when people say, okay, but the human body is much more complex than an airplane. That's not true when you see the complexity of the airplane. But I think that this company, this other industry, are not taking excuse that their device is so complex and therefore we cannot use a simulation. They're more coming with the point to say, okay, let's take advantage of whatever is available and let's try to innovate along this line. That's exactly the same point. Before having a digital twin of yourself down to the DNA level, it might take another 30, 40 years to go there. But using the technology that we've got today, we can make sure that we can treat some difficult situation, possibly a cancer later on, a heart failure from you, and extend your life further. That's what we want to do, to make sure that more people can take advantage of that and keep living.
So is there any clinical application in particular that you say, okay, that's going to be the first one where we see that really has been adopted broadly, or the next one? Like, what would it be?
There is one which has been widely adopted from Airflow. They are doing some fantastic elements. The Airflow story is very interesting. They had to invest quite a lot of money, a lot of time in order to convince people. And therefore, after some time, people realize that indeed this kind of computer model, very well validated, very well trusted, can make a big difference. I think that we always need to have this kind of example to make sure that others will say, okay, why not after all? Why not going into this example? But so far, it's still very difficult. One of the key elements that I was discussing with KU Leuven, like a kind of a flagship for all the university, we have to make sure that all the students, especially all the students in biomedical engineering, are trained on simulation. They need to understand what it is. They need to understand the limitation of that. So that's a little bit the goal, to say, okay, everybody can have access to this solver. Let's work with them. Let's work with the teacher so that they've got some right curriculum, and the students who are getting out of the university will know exactly what it is. We need to make sure to start with the young people in such a way that they will be bringing that. And I'm also talking about medical students, making sure that the future surgeon, the future doctor will understand the value of that. Some people who are opposed to the use of simulation, well, we cannot convince everybody. That would be a big mistake to say, okay, let's try to make sure that everybody are agreeing on that. There will be some people who will not be willing to use that for whatever reason, no matter of how much validation we are showing them. But if we have a good fraction of the doctor or the biomedical engineer who say, okay, yes, that's definitely something that we need to do, that will be enough to initiate the movement and to start saving a lot of life. When we are doing that, I'm sure that everybody will just go along this line. Similarly, when we say that simulation can be used before a clinical trial in order to find out what will happen in the patient before we are implanting this kind of device. People are saying, okay, no way simulation can replace a clinical trial in the future because we need to do that with the patient. Okay, I don't mind that. Let's make sure that before doing any kind of clinical trial, we've got all the evidence that we can do on the computer so that we maximize the safety when we are doing the clinical trial with real patient. And guess what? Like everything that happened in the automotive, aeronautic industry, and so on, people will be doing more and more computer model until some time when people will ask, okay, but why are you still doing some kind of physical testing, which are showing exactly what you are going out of the computer model? Let's stop the physical testing because there will be a cost. Will that happen in healthcare? I don't know. But for sure, what I know is that before doing any kind of in vivo testing for the animals or for the human, why not taking advantage of this computer? A digital twin on the computer, you can kill it as many times as you want. There is no problem for that. But a real patient, we cannot even harm him. You have to make sure that everything is fine.
And I think that's a wonderful note to end our episode today on. Thierry, thanks a lot for joining us. We always end with a few key takeaways from the episode, and I'd like to do that here as well. And for me, I think the key takeaways are probably the fact that it's easier to create a digital twin of a patient than it is of an airplane, and that it's going to allow us to eliminate the need for car crashes to simulate what's happening to the patient, but we can do that on the computer. The role of the end-to-end collaboration with clinicians, that's really going to make or break the adoption and scaling of any type of technical solution, which I think is a very good point that you make as well. And then one aspect that I found very interesting as well is the fact that using this kind of technology technology, modeling and simulation, that it really can help bring innovations earlier to patients than with more traditional approaches, and that can only benefit these patients, which I think is very exciting. So thanks a lot, Thierry. We appreciate your insights and sharing them with us on 3D Players. This is a podcast where we explore trends, insights and innovations in personalized and sustainable healthcare. We were your hosts, Peter Slagmolen and Sebastian de Boot. Thank you all for listening and join us for the next edition.